Architect Diksha Sharma, Assistant Professor, School of Architecture. I am honored to be the host and moderator of the second day of the International E-Conference and Lecture Series on Rediscovering Cities 2K20. I would like to welcome you all and thank each one of you for being a part of the very informative session, which aimed to provide a platform for deliberations on the various concerns related to the city and its components. On day one, we heard insightful lectures from our eminent speakers, Dr. Ebru, on the topic, History and Transformation, the Continuity of Traditional Forms in Modern Turkish Architecture, and architect Hemant Wala on City Vibrancy of Life Mechanics of Systems. I would again like to congratulate and extend a very heartfelt thanks to both the speakers for successfully keeping up with yesterday's session and for enlightening minds. Before we start today's session, I would like to clarify a few points. Questions during the lecture can be asked in the chat box. The same will be attended by the speaker in question and answer session at the end of the lecture. If any questions are left unattended, the same will be replied via email. Moving forward with today's event, let me introduce you to our first speaker, Dr. Zebun Nasreen Ahmed from Bangladesh. Professor Dr. Zebun Nasreen Ahmed has been teaching at the Department of Architecture, Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology in Dhaka since 1988, from where she got her degree in Bachelor's of Architecture. She completed her MPhil in 1987 and PhD in 1994 from UK. Dr. Zebun has designed several buildings, including National Liberation War Memorial at Mujibnagar, Bangladesh. Other than teaching architectural design, Dr. Zebun Nasreen Ahmed also lectures on various subjects like daylighting, luminous and thermal environments in buildings, green architecture, and sustainability. She is the author of the book, Letting in the Light, and has made contributions in 8 books. She is going to speak on the topic, 21st Century Challenges, How Do Cities Cope? I welcome you on board, ma'am.
Thank you very much. As you heard from, I think I've missed the name, but as you've heard, I'm a professor of architecture at BUET in Dhaka. And I'm honored to be able to present here at the International Conference on Rediscovering Cities. And it was a great honor for me to get the invitation to speak. And I'll be talking about 21st century challenges. How do cities actually cope? So I'll just begin my thoughts. It's really a conceptual paper. And we must remember that this paper was actually written before the COVID-19 global pandemic. And while this outbreak was not at the background of the thoughts behind this presentation, many of the observations and suggestions here could be considered to address the related issues. I hope I'm heard by everybody. Is that okay?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. You can go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just begin my topic. This century, the 21st century, has a lot of new challenges, and they're very different from the past. And of course, any new challenge creates unpredictability, whether it's globally or locally. Another thing that we must remember is that the built environment directly causes environmental degradation, and the role of designers is therefore of paramount importance. And if we want sustainable development, we must be at the forefront of making these decisions whereby our built environment is going to be saved from such unsustainable problems. So in the presentation, what I'll focus on, I'll be talking more about my own city, Dhaka, but we must also remember that Dhaka is like any other city in the subcontinent. So a lot of the things that I say about Dhaka will maybe be also relevant for India and the other neighboring countries. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the present day challenges, about unbridled and thoughtless growth implications if these are unchecked, about livability, which becomes the first victim. And then I'll talk about rays of hope that we have in our hands to avert oblivion. And ultimately, I'll home in on a design approach that can be used to stop degradation. We can use nature as an inspiration, we can incorporate the promises of the latest technology. But while we're looking at everything new, we must also remember that we must look at vernacular. So I'll be talking about these things, and I think a lot of these things will be relevant also for all cities in this region. So if we go to the background, issues that clearly impact the environment are responsibility of architects and designers of the built environment, and it is through our professional involvement that we impact the environment. And there's a clear connection. Nowadays, people are absolutely clear about this, that built forms and microclimate are directly linked, and these built forms have the potential to affect climate change and its global impacts. So but at the same time, we must remember that learning from the past is important. Things that have served the environment well over the ages are important, because, I'm not going to be talking about the solutions that the vernacular did, but we need, because that will require a lot more focused investigation. What I'm talking about is that we have to still look at the past, because people did cope, and they cope very well, and we are not being able to cope. So let's see where and how these gaps are. And through this paper, I'd like to build awareness, because I know that this conference is about rediscovering cities and how to go forward, and a lot of the technical papers are to do with this. So I'm hoping that my talk will maybe give some sort of a background to the in-depth studies that we'll be hearing throughout this conference, that we've heard yesterday and today and tomorrow. And so this paper builds awareness. It urges all stakeholders, professionals, researchers, policymakers to cooperate at the multidisciplinary level. We can't do it alone. We have to remember that. So what is the present situation? If we look at urbanization at the moment, these are explosive numbers. In 2007, the world population just started to exceed the rural population. But in South Asia, of course, in our countries, this has not reached the stage yet. Urbanization growth is still unprecedented, but we have not yet reached an equal number of urban population as the rural population. Our rural population still exceeds the urban one. But in Bangladesh, the prediction is that we will have a population of about more than 200 million by 2050, which is a huge number. 2015 Liveability Index is a very important milestone. It ranked 6 South Asian cities as the lowest of livability. It performed the worst in terms of livability. If I have the names, Delhi had a score of 110, Mumbai of 115, and these the scores, the higher they are, the worse they are. Kathmandu 125, Colombo 127, Karachi 135, Dhaka 139 out of 140 listed cities. So we are very, very, very vulnerable in terms of livability. So, and if we look at the livability, these are two pictures of Dhaka. One, I'm showing the sort of built up environment that we have, and in the other, I'm showing the sort of streets that we have, how we are accommodating this population. It talks about housing ability. It talks about mobility. These pictures say volumes about these things. And related to these are environmental equity. Are we being able to serve the environment? What are the community facilities? How is it taking place? How are we managing with this? So these are the things that I'm going to be talking about in livability. So we are keeping on growing and growing and growing. And what happens if we grow unchecked? We will continue to lose our livability. We will continue to put pressures on our infrastructure. There will be a loss of green. We will continue to generate a lot of waste. But at the same time, having done all this, we're raising expectations because we're getting richer, so we can afford more. And so we think that, okay, since we can afford, let's have it. So we're raising expectations. Now we can't do with less. These are problems. So if we look at loss of livability first, we architects, designers of the environment, we create the built environment. We make up the cities. We make up all the habitats that we live in. So livability of cities is one of the first victims of unchecked growth. It directly impacts the ecological footprint index, the EFI, which is the Earth's carrying capacity. Conceptually, this means that the maximum population of a given species, we're talking about humans here, supported indefinitely in a defined habitat. And the amount that we can, how much can we do without permanently impairing its productivity. And this is what's happening. But when we say that we are impacting the ecological footprint index, we are actually putting a death blow on these things, on how much population we can have, on how much we can grow without actually destroying our habitat and our productivity. Dhaka is actually presently the densest city on earth. We have a population density of 47,400 persons per square kilometer. And this is rising exponentially with time. The problems regarding livability here in Dhaka and in South Asian cities is very different from the affluent Western cities. We have to understand that. And how is it different? Let's see. In the West, if we have just one example, the urban population shifts from the city to the outskirts of the cities. For more privacy, they want better options, they want lower costs, so they go away from the city center to the suburbs. What is the result? Longer commutes. They have to go from, they have to travel to work, to different infrastructure for different needs. And so they have a loss of quality time. They sit in traffic jams. But as a result, what happens? City centers become abandoned and they can only provide congested housing options because they're abandoned. People who can afford better move out, and only those who cannot afford stay in the city center. And so what happens? You're creating deprived areas, and we're creating haves and have-nots. People who do not have are in the city centers. So we're subjecting them to unsocial and even criminal activities of these places. In Dhaka, what's happening? Temporary settlements are growing up in the fringe areas, not in the city center. Migrants come to the city, they seek shelter on arrival to the city in the fringe areas. They don't come and live in the city center. And from that fringe area, they slowly come and work in the cities from that vantage point. So what's happening is that the boundaries of cities start expanding. You can't stop the city from expanding. The fringe areas are converted to makeshift settlements, and from their original use as agricultural land, they become built up land. This is a sort of an encroachment which is causing an ecological imbalance in the vicinity of these cities. We're losing green, we're losing ways in which our cities could give away their waste and other things. So we have a total loss of livability. We're destroying our cities. So unchecked growth, another thing is we're putting pressures on the infrastructure. When we have unchecked urbanization, as an example, I'm giving a residential area in Dhaka, say Dhanmundi or Gulshan. In phase one, we had large plots. Maybe we call them 1 bigha. So we had 3 plots to an acre. And this is where the government officers would get their plots and they would live there with their families, 1 family per plot. Phase 2 was when the family grew up. So the next generation came up and these plots started to be divided up because the children needed their own plots. So it was inheritance for the children. So the original low-rise walk-ups, they were there in the beginning, and in the beginning, in the phase 1, we had these homes, one-unit homes, and these became low-rise walk-ups in both places because they could serve easily the original family with the growing up family. But what happened in the phase 3 from the 80s onwards was we started having multi-ownership houses. And this is the dominant form of housing presently in Dhaka. So the original plot, which housed only one family, now houses about 20 to 30 families. And the infrastructure is absolutely stretched beyond its original load. And it's very, very difficult to cope with this sort of excessive pressure. And this obviously compromises the quality of the facilities and needs to be addressed absolutely urgently. This is an example of the first phase of development in the top portion, where we had these plots. We have them on the north-south facing roads as well as east-west facing roads. There were no problems. But in the second phase of development, they still were low-rise, so it wasn't really a problem. What happened in the third phase was the whole area got built up, and we're having about 30 families per plot, 20 to 30 families per plot. And this makes a lot of difference whether we're having it on an east-west road or on a north-south road. So, and this is a picture showing how the environment is completely different for these two different situations, and how people have coped, which is not a top part of this discussion, but I'm just showing you an example. So we had a loss of green. You can see that there were hardly any gardens in this latest development. It's all completely built up because that's the economic option. You need to build as much as you can so that you can get rent or you can sell it off. We had a loss of unpaved areas, and this, in a way, I was looking at, we've been working on some research using the green plot ratio, which Singapore uses as a measure. It relates the building height, the floor area ratio, the ground coverage, and the population density to carbon dioxide emission. As we know, carbon dioxide emission is one of the big greenhouse gases, and it shows our sustainability and our vulnerability to environmental change. So unless checked, urbanization becomes a very significant part of spoiling our ecological balance. Excuse me. Another severe environmental impact of changing the surface from green to paved is the danger of flash flooding. We have a lot of rain, but the water is not absorbed anymore, and the runoff volume builds up from place to place. So because we don't have a lot of drainage, we have these surfaces over which the water is flowing and growing in volume, and this hampers civic life because we have little floods in different places. And these flows not only spoil our civic life for a while, they can also damage the surfaces. And so there's a loss of infrastructure once again, which is directly damaging our road surfaces. I have two pictures here. The one on the left is it shows how Dhaka was in the past. Green, the portion towards the northeast part of this is grayish. That was actually Dhaka, and the rest of it is green. And now it's like this. We hardly have any green. This is unchecked urbanization. This is absolutely the changing phase of Dhaka. Okay, another problem. I'm going to be going over the problems. These are all challenges of the 21st century. Increase of waste, which is another effect of unchecked population growth. Half of this waste is residential, and it's a lot of waste. Waste, we know, can benefit the population by diverting to productive uses. We can recycle waste, we can extract fuel from waste, but do we do this? To do this, we must adequately sort and treat the waste. we must have proper waste treatment facilities. And they can also, and we've seen in many developed countries, we've seen that these waste treatment facilities, they also serve as park and community spaces. And so this is a much lacking need in overcrowded metropolises. And so the waste treatment can also serve that purpose. So it's a win-win situation. These are two examples that one is in the Scandinavian countries. We're seeing that how people are using the waste areas on the top left to ski, and they're open areas for community engagement. The other one is a Hong Kong sludge treatment plant. Again, you can see how the roof has been treated with a lot of greenery so that those areas can be used by the community. And so it serves a community facility. It adds to the quality of the environment, and it gives more livability to the area. Another thing that we have to understand is a big challenge is raised expectations. With increased economic affordability, we have an increase of expectations. The result is that basic needs and comfort standards shift upwards and they become more demanding. And this has enormous implications in terms of energy consumption. So when we look at the way our expectations have been raised, we see that, for instance, if we look at the rural community, a picture here on the top left, we can see is a boy working in the dark. He has 2 candles. If you give him another candle, there's an enormous increase in light, and he's very happy. He's been working in very low light, so 1 candle, which is about 10 candle power, helps him so much. I think it's 1 candle power. Anyway, it's a very, very low, it's probably 10 lumens. It gives him a lot of satisfaction. But the gentleman working on the other side, working in a lot of light, if you give him another candle, it makes no difference to him. And he is not happy at all working when the light diminishes a bit. So if you have about 300 lux there, and you have about 20 lux here, the difference is enormous. I don't think you have 20 lux, maybe 10 lux there. There's a lot of difference, but what a lot of expectations have been raised because of affordability, because of people being habituated to better conditions. This we can say about temperatures also. If we in air-conditioned spaces, people can't even tolerate a slight temperature increase. So if you have, say, if you set your temperature to 24 Celsius of your air-conditioned space, and it goes to 26 or 25, you think, oh my God, I'm sweating. Whereas if you go to a non-air-conditioned space in Dhaka, and the temperature inside is 24 or 25, you'll say, oh, this is nice. People in air-conditioned spaces cannot tolerate even a slight temperature increase in comparison with the rural populace. We have to understand that. Okay, so to the future, let's see, what can we do in the future? How can we improve our situation? We want to be livable, but we also want better conditions, definitely, because we want to be livable, but we don't want to spoil our environment doing that. We don't want a lot of the negative things that we're seeing. We don't want to increase our ecological footprints. We don't want to increase our carbon dioxide emissions. How do we do it? There are 6 points, 6 actions, in fact, which based on the PSC. All of this is in my paper, which I'm sure you'll get in printed form from this conference. So these 6 points are: provide more transportation choices, promote equitable and affordable housing, enhance economic competitiveness, support existing communities, coordinate and leverage federal policies and investments, value communities and neighborhoods. These are 6 points. I haven't made them up. But if we look, the first 2 points directly relate to architecture and planning. And we'll also be going to point 6 because it indirectly relates to the way we practice architecture. The rays of hope we're talking about. People are doing a lot in Bangladesh, in India, in Pakistan, in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, in all the countries around us. We are facing a lot of environmental degradation, but the people, the experts are actually working very hard and thinking about solutions. So I won't go into this detail. This is a strategic plan for Dhaka, which was made in 2015. And it talks about spatial planning as the center. And it talks about how the other, how the vision of a good city, how the infrastructure services and geophysical and social and cultural structures are related to them, and how they should be implemented and monitored. So, and this strategic plan is also available online. So anybody who's interested can look at it as an to compare it with their own city, or to look at for lessons that they can put into their own city. And you'll find the, this source in my paper also. So the first thing was traffic solutions. Now let's look at how these implementations are happening in Dhaka. In Dhaka, we don't have any, we have a very general lack of public transport. But how are we addressing it? We are not addressing this lack in a very proper manner. The options we are using are very, very questionable, and lots of researchers around in Dhaka, in Bangladesh, are talking about these things. For example, in Dhaka, we could do with bus rapid transits, which were cheaper and swifter option, and they would serve about 60 to 70% of the population. Instead, what we are doing, we are planning to implement 6 metro lines, which will only serve 6 to 8% of the population. And 45% of our population still are foot or non-motorized vehicle users, and they will be totally unattended by this solution. Look at the way we're addressing housing inequities. 65% of Dhaka's population are migrants. They come to Dhaka from places all around, and they make temporary makeshift kacha dwellings. This challenges the equitability among the populations. You have these people, you have these beautiful houses. You can see the multi-ownership housing on the right, and the sort of, old vernacular, worn out dwellings on the left. There's a big, cultural difference between the two. At present, about 90% of Dhaka metropolitan region is identified as residential, because everybody is making these makeshift dwellings all over the place. And this is inequitable. How do we address inequities? These inequities. We can't do it unless we have permanent high-rise residences instead of the kacha type to increase, and these permanent high-rise residences have to be affordable, available housing for low and moderate income groups, not only for the high income groups. And infrastructures and services have to be improved. Financing mechanisms for housing needs to be introduced. And we still go for these plot type models. We need block type housing concepts so that these infrastructures can be shared by structures, concentrated structures, so that more open space is freed for other community users. We need pedestrian oriented development within easy access of public transport networks and community facilities. We need all this. Another important thing, which was point 6, if you remember, I was talking about number 6. I talked about the first 2 points. Now point 6 is pride of place. Value within communities and neighborhoods have to be generated. We have to generate pride in localities. We have to identify characteristics, icons, qualities of the area, and tell the public, bring awareness of the inhabitants to these. Tell them that we must uphold and maintain these in any development scheme, and the place has to look and preserve these values. Otherwise, we are losing our history, we are losing our identity. Participatory design methods would involve stakeholders in decision making and give them a pride of ownership to the scheme. This is very important. An outcome of development if we have a participatory method, it would become more livable and any drawbacks would be better tolerated by the public. If we talk about participatory design, which is extremely important in our regions, unfortunately, we hardly do it, despite the fact that we have so much of a population that deserves participatory approach. Here, most of our planning is done by a top-down approach where the authorities say that this is what we need and they do it. The main thrust in participatory design is that everybody, we have to involve the stakeholders in the design decision making. And who are these stakeholders? The designers, the users, the administrators, owners, tenants, everybody. And gender participation becomes very vital. And we must remember that women form half of the population. They must be given importance. When women become part of the decision making, the whole process changes. Men and women actually have different processes inherent to the ways their brains are made. I'm talking about a gender equity. I'm introducing a slide where I'm just talking about this difference in the brains that men and women have. Scientists have identified about 100 differences between these. Men use 7 times more gray matter than women. So this gray matter actually helps to have a tunnel vision, and a tunnel vision actually lets them focus on problems. They focus very deeply, so they can have a very logical way of looking at things. But it can make them insensitive to other needs. Women use white matter. So we have gray matter and white matter. So women use white matter 10 times more than men do. And this allows multitasking. So they can transition easily from between tasks. So and that's the way women are, because their child will come, they'll do a bit of look at the child, and then there'll be an office need, they'll look at the office need, then they'll have to do the kitchen help will come and they'll do a bit of cooking and things. So they're always multitasking. When both the genders are involved in design, the result has greater acceptability, because inclusivity and multitasking is seen to form the backbone of female mindsets. And this starts from a very early age in their lives, when they're children. Okay. Now let's look at the new materials. How are they offering a new ray of hope? We're talking about these things that we can look at. New materials provide new options in architecture, like, you know, when steel and concrete came into the building industry, what happened? People changed the construction technique. They allowed large spans, which is what happened in the 200 years ago. High-rise buildings started after that. But there are other indirect effects of new materials and technologies, which okay, so they allowed us to have larger spans, but they also allowed us to have larger windows. They allowed us to explore shell structure. They allowed us to explore shapes, so that plasticity of concrete could be explored. Fine. Now I've given 2 examples of 2 new materials, which have come into the market. They're very, very expensive, but soon they're going to become cheaper, hopefully, after people realize how important they are and they do more research and find out ways to make them more available to the public. Aerogel is a weightless insulation. So when you use something like that, the way you're insulating your building, now the insulation becomes even more important with COVID and everything. But the way this insulation is about not only germs, but heat and noise. What happens is, your insulation doesn't have any weight, so you're not having to put in extra structure. Capcoma is a strand rod, which is a Japanese invention, and this rod is so tensile. It's about 5 times lighter than steel and about 10 times more stronger. And this can actually provide a lot of earthquake support, which we all need. So these things will slowly come into our architecture and change the way our buildings look and also the way our buildings perform. Changes in technology itself, digitization. What are we doing? It's introducing possibilities of parametric design. We're allowing natural phenomena to be predicted within unbuilt spaces and to be molded by them. So we don't have to build them to find out our mistakes. Before they're built, we find out our mistakes and we correct them. Many building performance issues can be handled at the design stage. And this encourages energy efficiency and environmental sustainability. Now with the COVID pandemic coming, we'll also have to make them germ-free. So these sorts of things will easily, and soon we'll have these new computer programs which will help us to predict how vulnerable our spaces are. Digital technology also offers another thing that we have to remember: rise of social media and avenues of protest. And this is a key tool in participatory design. If we are actually designing something and it is not socially acceptable, it's going to be there out right in the media very soon. There's no way to hide. We must remember that. New technology also allows architects to depart from conventions of pure form, which was the hallmark of modernism. We had these, these square box-like solids and things. The minimalism and looking for and spaces which were very geometric. Now we have soft undulating forms, and though we're using rigid materials, for instance, the architecture of Zaha Hadid, late Zaha Hadid, Frank Gehry, you'll see that there are lots of curves, but they're all using rigid materials. So how are they doing that? By using new digital technology, small incremental changes of angles, incorporating into generating the optimum size and shape of elements which make the building skin. And this gives efficiency in the building construction techniques also. It minimizes waste, optimizes costs. So these are all positives. I have two pictures. We see how what a lot of options the form of architecture is now being open to, because of digital technology. The top one is in USA. The bottom one is a Russian scheme that Zaha Hadid made. Another thing to look at is mimicking nature. I'm a fan of Jane Benus, who talked about how we have to learn from nature. Nature had and has 20 to 30 million organisms, and they survived and adapted well through 3.8 billion years of development and modifications, mutating when necessary, keeping themselves and the environment out of harm's way. This is the way nature grew and survived. There's a lot of lesson to be learned from here. These must be observed and studied, and they can help us survive because nature survived. Why can't we survive without degrading our surroundings? We can do it. We have to look at nature. The concept of biomimicry came from there, and a lot of architects are now using this. Michael Pollan comes to mind, and a lot. Biomimicry, we've seen looks at a study of nature. Ken Young of Malaysia is also did a lot about biomimicry. Study of nature, you look at it, you find out how nature addresses resource efficiency. From that standpoint, you emulate those principles into construction techniques. You don't imitate nature. So if I say that I want to emulate, say, a lotus leaf. A lotus leaf has this quality that when the water falls on it, the water forms a big drop, and it somehow takes away all the dirt from the leaf. So it cleans the leaf. It's a sort of a self-cleaning mechanism. So when people wanted to look at the how it was doing it, they looked at the actual principle behind this self-cleaning principle, and they saw that if you looked very deeply into the leaf at a very, very nano level, you could actually see that the surface indentations, the surface texture was such that it allowed this thing to happen. So if we could somehow emulate this into our buildings, it would be so, we could have self-cleaning buildings. We now have these skyscrapers, which are really tall buildings, and we have to clean them. How do we clean them? We actually expose people with who come down on ropes. They're protected, but it's still very, very hazardous because there's a lot of wind out there. And then they physically clean the windows. Instead, now people are looking at glass, which has this self-cleaning mechanism in it, emulating the lotus leaf. And so when the rain falls on the window, it cleans it. You don't need a person to do it. So what we're talking about is not blindly copying formal aspects, but we are understanding the principles and processes of whatever we want to emulate, and then we replicate them through new means. So say if I want to copy the principle of the lotus leaf, I don't make my building look like a lotus leaf. I look at the principle behind it and put it in. Okay, another point now I'd like to talk about is globalization. Globalization, we've seen, often merges cultures, different cultures. And so often it doesn't foster diversity. In the past, in our countries, we copied the West. Unfavorable results have often come out from there. It's important to examine trends thoroughly before we blindly adopt them. This is an important thing. It's a sort of a cautionary signal. We should, and as an example, I'd like to talk about the present focus that we now have on smart technology and cities. Are we ready for it now? Much of our world is, we have poverty concerns, we have affordability, inequity. These are our concerns. Land scarcity, overcrowding, these must be addressed. So should we spend available resources on technical gadgets, on systems, concepts of smart? Or should we think first about alleviating this divide between the haves and the have-nots to give them an equitable sort of an area, to an equitable solution, rather than coming up just because the West is coming up with smart cities, we also come up with smart cities. No, we need to fix our priorities. And I'd like to also talk about the vernacular. We don't use the vernacular just to copy the old, nor are we trying to glorify the old and say that they're the good. But it is true that they did survive in very similar conditions to what we have at the moment. It was a sustainable system. Our ancestors coped with those conditions, and those conditions have not really changed much. What has changed? Not the problems, but our expectations of basic needs and comfort, our affordability. These things have changed. But we also have bigger tools, we have more resources, we have more technology, and so we have more things, we have more tools to work with. So what we need is, we have to reassess our standards, we have to look at the old, we have to reassess our standards, we have to make them context specific, and we also have to keep sustainability in mind when setting values. Just because I can afford it, I should not go for a 20-degree cold air-conditioned space. No, I have to understand what I actually need and make it a sort of a logical and acceptable norm. We need to create spaces that are comfortable. We need to maintain productivity. But we do not need to set our standards too high, and we do not need to become energy efficient. We can look at our vernacular. This is a picture of our vernacular in northwest Bangladesh, in Dinajpur, near Dinajpur. And we can look at now new technology offers immense possibilities so that we can see how to adapt, how to use their do's and don'ts, and how to fix them using computer simulations, using other tools that I've already talked about. Okay, so I've come to almost to the end of my paper. I think I have 5 more minutes, and I'll try to make it short. This paper has discussed the present state of development, how we treat our cities and strive towards expansionism. Clearly, there has to be a limit to this growth. We've made our shares of mistake in urbanism, but there are also things we've done which can be treated as rays of hope. We need to look towards a brighter future, this future has to be full of new innovations, technology, and material. And we also need to remind ourselves of the past. We can't do it without the past. How we once had the capacity to cope with challenges despite all the challenges. So I've tried to broadly and briefly mention key present day challenges and what our responses should be conceptually. It's not been I'm not talking about exact figures. I'm talking about a conceptual approach. Our coping mechanisms, if I want to sum them up, are first, learn from nature, respect it, live with it. Do not compete against it. Definitely not. Number 2, we need a participatory design approach. We'll use those principles, we'll involve all stakeholders along with gender equity, and this is one of the hallmarks of sustainability. Number 3, we must have, all our decisions must be informed. We should take it into account that there are everything available to us, and these are all diverse aspects. There's no excuse for ignorance in this information and digital age. We have a lot of information at our service. We must use them, and we can't say, oh, I didn't know. You must know. We must know when we're designing. We must look to the future to see trends and expected alterations in program or conditions. It's no good looking just at the present. We have to look at the future, and we must have development which can better handle swift and random changes, because changes are so swift. If you look at, say, 10 years ago, I remember 10 years ago, the smartphone was not there. Now, you can't manage without the smartphone. Today, I'm approaching all of you in this pandemic situation, isolated in my home, in another country, just because of technology. So the way we are approaching everything is changing day to day. We must be able to cope with that. And remembering that all these issues are going to be diverse and complexities are going to increase. That is why we need multidisciplinary teams. I'm an architect. That doesn't mean that I can do it alone. Never. Architecture can no longer be considered within the pure domain of the architect. We have to work hand in hand with other professionals. Finally, what I'd like to say is, I hope you found it interesting. Firstly, we cannot cope if we continue the way we're going. We can't cope. And unless we heed these lessons, it may be difficult to guarantee a continuation of humankind, where we might be spelling our own doom. COVID-19 may be just a wake-up call of threats to come. Who knows what's just around the corner? Let's save ourselves while we can. That is what I'd like to say. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, to all of you from the ICRC 2K20, from the MMU University, from the people who have organized this, and from the media organizations who are handling this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You focused on all the present day and emerging challenges, growth implications of the cities, and how the solutions are worked upon to confront and appease their effects. Now over to questions. We have a lot of them pouring in. I'll read it out to you, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay. Metro has been a good solution in Delhi NCR. Why do you suppose that it will serve only 6% in Dhaka?
This is actually based on a study that was done by the people who are working on this issue. And it's you will see in my paper the direct references. It actually will serve a maximum of 6 to 8%, it says. Because as I said, that most of our people are walkers, plus and non-motorized people, maybe also walkability, maybe also access issues. Another thing is that this group was telling us about how once you get to the station, you have to actually, these stations are not really designed once you, how to get there. You have to walk to it, but you have to walk through very heavy traffic to get to it. And once you get down at your destination station, again, you have to, how do you get to your actual destination? You have to walk through heavy traffic. So there are lots of unaddressed issues in the design of this thing, and they actually calculated this. So it is based on a study. Does that answer the question?
Okay, ma'am. Right, another question for you, ma'am. Why is it that for waste management, we look to the West for solutions rather than creating our own indigenous solutions?
Oh, we have to create our own indigenous solutions, definitely. But I just showed 2 examples of how even these solutions can serve our community. Of course, we need to look for our own ways of looking at it. So we have these, we call them tokais. They come and they take, they pick out the things from the waste. We are always doing that. In fact, in Bangladesh, we have Waste Concern, which is a very, very important organization which introduced the way that we handle waste. And so they have done a lot of work in Dhaka itself. But this thing, unless we institutionalize it, unless the government takes, part in these decision making, it won't happen. It's a private organization, which is why our waste fields are now filling up. Waste fields are filling up, and they're becoming, they're up to their capacity. And we have these tokais there also. Having a tokai in a way is a sort of an inequitable solution. Why am I asking my young little boys who should be going to school to go to the waste dump and pick out the dirt and the things that he can use and recycle and maybe sell at a small gain? It's not fair on that person's life. So these are the things. That's why this has to be organized from the government level. That is what I'm actually trying to say. And showing the example of the West, because there are some things. Just because the West is the West, we have lots of difference, doesn't mean that we won't take their good examples.
Right, ma'am. Okay, another question for you is, how can the quality control system for water segregation be improved in smaller areas or where people are unaware of waste management?
Water treatment. Again, I think that I didn't talk about water treatment in my paper. So, but if you want to look at water treatment, there are lots of sources. I don't think I'll talk about this here, but I'll just mention that you can look up the sources. We are doing a lot in Bangladesh also about water management, but these, whenever there are small water management systems, the problem is that you need a lot of space to to let the water stand, the ETPs and everything. And this sort of space is a bit lacking in Bangladesh because we are, a highly dense city. We hardly have a lot of space to, make these water treatment solutions. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. All right, we have another question here. For any city with dense population, the gap between the rich and poor enlarges drastically. In a scenario like that, what efforts can be made to make housing and amenities affordable to all?
As I said, that I did give 6 points about housing issues in my slides. If you look at it, you'll see what I've talked about is that this actually has to be handled from the top, from the authorities. They have to be, but the solutions have to come from the bottom. So it has to be a sort of a double, two-pronged approach. Uh, People don't have the money to build houses, yet they have to be built. So how do we actually do that? We'll have to have, there are lots of places, people, the government should take responsibility for this. In the West, again, I bring the West because there are lots of things that they do positively. I'm not saying they do it because of the goodness of their heart, but they actually were forced through industrial action in the past. What they did was they started making these affordable housing because that was the way to address the issue. We have to start making addressable housing from the government. In the West, government takes responsibility for unemployment. They give unemployment benefit. They support these people who are unemployed. We're not doing that. We think that, oh, unemployment, that's their own problem. No, it's not. It is the problem of the government. And that is why we have to learn from these lessons that the West is giving us. How do we do that? But actually, it has to come from the government. This sort of housing and infrastructure development, and getting them. Once we decide that I'm going to give a housing, it's not that I'm going to do it on my own. I'll get the people on board and make the housing. In a way, we can have sort of schemes where where these people will start to become owners of their housing by paying back slowly. But of course, that this is a whole other problem. Okay.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Another question, ma'am. Due to increasing modernity, there is no or little demand for vernacular architecture in buildings. Everyone wants a comfortable and modern surroundings. How can we encourage people for the same?
Exactly. Of course, you cannot force. Again, if we're talking about inclusivity and design participation, when people want to have a building which is, of contemporary design and everything, you cannot force it. What you can do is you can start to make people aware of the good things of vernacular. I'm not saying you copy vernacular. That's not good enough. What I'm saying is that we look at the values that the vernacular had. We look at the way that they approach design, and then we see whether we look at their materials, we look at the way their environment was, and then we see what is good for us, and then we make what is good for us attractive to them by building up awareness of these issues. You can't suddenly put a vernacular design onto a person. That's not done. But you can make them aware of the good parts of those things, and you can start to do research on that. You can make a list of the things that are really sustainable so that we can start replicating those issues. Again, not copying them, but taking the principle.
Right, ma'am. All right, due to time scarcity, we won't be able to take any more questions. We have given an email ID in the chat box. Please send your questions on the same. Thank you, ma'am, for the very informative presentation. Thank you so much for taking our time and enlightening minds. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye, ma'am. So that marks the end of our first lecture by Dr. Zebun Nasreen Ahmed. Thank you so much, ma'am. With this, let me introduce you to our second speaker of the day, Architect Prasanna Desai. Architect Prasanna Desai obtained his degree in 1980 and Masters of Architecture in Urban Design in 1983, both from SPA, Delhi. He worked with architect Achyut Kanvinde in the early years before joining postgraduate studies and later started his practice. He currently runs an architecture practice in Pune, which is involved with urban design issues, emphasizing the role of an architect in the public domain, namely JNNURM, PSUP, slum rehabilitation work at Gedwara, and designing of safe and socially shared streets leading to creation of healthy, hygienic, and humane neighborhoods. Currently, the firm is working on major urban design initiatives, namely walkable and people-friendly neighborhood streets on the Smart City Pune, Pune Bicycle Plan, Pune Municipal Corporation, walkability project in 13 cities, Akurdi Pimple Nilap Neighborhood Street Upgradation PCMC, achieving the last mile connectivity for Pune Maha Metro, etc. Recently, he has been appointed as a global mentor under City Investments to Innovate, Integrate and Sustain program initiated by Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, supported to guide projects of excellence to build the capacity of the ULBs to implement integrated projects in the cities of Visakhapatnam and Amravati under the thematic area Social and Organizational Innovation in Low-Income Settlements. He is active in academics for the last 4 decades, mentoring and nurturing students all over India. Currently, he is the professor and director at PVP College of Architecture. His topic is creating healthy, hygienic, and humane neighborhoods by people participatory approach. I welcome you on board, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Aradhana ji, thank you, Ravaji, and thank you, School of Architecture, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I think in the first session, Dr. Ahmed has set the ball rolling, and appropriately in 2 parts, 2 contexts. One was the urban transportation realm, and the second was the habitat realm. My presentation would be more beyond the boundary, as I call it, that within the boundary you have the built environment, the habitation, and all other land uses. And it is between these lies the spaces, and mostly the streets and the cities. My presentation would also start with some issues, some harsh realities, some theory. It will have some logic, and it will have some simple solutions. And in the end, some thoughts for you or minds to take it home and think it over. It's titled Creating Healthy, Hygienic and Humane Neighborhoods by People Participatory Approach. Last decade plus, a lot of talk has been going on rethinking cities, sustainable cities, resilient cities, livable cities, smart cities. I think all mean the same, but the names have been always different. The cities look like this today. And some of these images were also shared by Dr. Ahmed. That is what current cities are like. And we aspire, because aspiration is for these kind of cities. Look at the energy consumption, look at the densities, look at the environment we create. These were the cities of the past. This is Jaisalmer in India, which was in climate, context, connectivity, and culture. This is Jodhpur. The streets had shaded streets, nice courtyard, climatically conscious. And today, we have this pendulum which has come to. It is the then and it is the now. And I think what we need is the middle path. The then has many values, now has the technology and urbanization and industrialization with which we have a lot of opportunities. But I think the real golden mean would be the middle path. Having said that, it is also can be compared with the meal. Today we have the pizzas, the burgers, and I think the earlier speaker, Dr. Ahmed, talked about the West and the Asian context. And this is the Indian thali. This is the where we wear ourselves, dress ourselves, simple. And this is the way a person in the Rajasthan puts on his attire. And this is how a person in the European context. It is in the context. But are we trying to do this is the question to all. And I think we must find our own solutions. Smart is being healthy, because smart word today is being very much used because of the smart cities. But I think it is to be healthy which is important. The city needs to make healthy choices for healthy citizens. This is Michael Bloomberg. He's the 3-time mayor of New York. And when he had come to Mumbai, he mentioned these 3 very specific points. There is a false choice between economic development and environmental quality. It is easy to quantify economic growth, but how do you put a value to 2 more years of life? So he's talking about health. Yes, you need jobs, you need growth, you need a lot of things, but to say that you need them before your health is a question. I would say if you are dying, you might look back and say that wasn't a good decision. And the last one is very critical. If you do not focus on the environmental quality of life, you will not be able to fix the economic side. If helping people to live longer, happier lives isn't the purpose of the government, then I don't know what is. This is Michael Bloomberg. Walkable cities reduce blood pressure, hypertension risks, finds the study. More walkable neighborhoods can reduce risk for diabetes. Brisk walking is better method for losing weight than going to a gym, study claims. City looks like this, with the streets around, the roads and the street, which consume almost 15 to 20% of the open space. And this can be compared as the arteries of the human body. So if you look at saved trees, they give you fresh air. Walkable streets give you healthy habits. Cycle-friendly streets give you healthy lifestyle. Safe neighborhood gives you a healthy body. Health becomes very critical. This is the way our arteries that the streets look like. The urban milieu, we may call it congestion, we may call it the mixed traffic conditions. 7 years ago, everyone saw Delhi's air to take a deadly U-turn, but nobody did anything. These are studies almost 10 years ago. Leave Delhi. This is what we are doing to our cities. And current situation also has brought us to a thinking point. That is Sunita Narayan, which talks about many solutions which are there, but they are not implemented to look at our cities. We must re-examine our norms for quality of life, said Ratan Tata, I think 4 months ago at one of the first very webinars which happened during this pandemic. Points to ponder: a developed country is not a place where poor have cars. It is a place where rich use public transport. That is Enrique Peñalosa, 3 times the mayor of Bogota. Cities have been taken over by the motor vehicles, and they need to be returned to the people. This is a very simple 4-pointer. What kind of a city do we want? Where my daughter and grandmother can walk and cross roads alone in the evening. Where I have all my daily needs within walkable distance of home. Where I share space as equal citizens with all others. That is equity of space. I think Dr. Ahmed was also talking about equity of space in a city. And a city which I am proud of its beauty, quietness, and civility. There are simple, common thoughts, and I don't think this whole presentation that I will give you is of simple common sense and common thoughts. Interesting research by Dr. Kolas Dora. If you look at the first slide, first diagram on top, there are house residential unit across the street. And if you have light traffic, you have 2,000 vehicles per day. You have 3.0 friends and 5.3 acquaintances. When the movement increases, the friends ratio goes down, 1.3 to 4.1. And when the traffic increases further, 0.9 to 3.1. That means socialization and connections go down. It's a different matter that connections today are all happening on mobile phones and WhatsApp and calling. But finally, meeting is very, very important. Bhutan is the only country in the world which talks about gross national happiness. and it is much more important than the GDP on which we really count about the growth of the countries. Enjoy the car. You can keep on building this, but does it really solve the problem is the issue. You can keep on adding number of lanes, but your space for the people will keep on reducing within the neighborhood and within the city. Parking will consume almost half of the space if you want that to be promoted. Having said that, Louis Mumford said, building more roads is like loosening your belt when you're getting fat. If you plan cities for car and traffic, you get car traffic. If you plan cities for people and places, you will get people and places, said Fred Kant. This is a master slide which shows that it is not important to move people. It is important to move people and not vehicles. So the extreme right is the number of cars which are carrying n number of people. And the same n number of people are into 3 buses and the same in bicycle. You are releasing the road space for other activities, also reducing pollution, also reducing your petrol consumption. Simple logic. Planning for public non-motorized transport, the reverse pyramid has to happen. Flying may be the top priority today and walking the last. Can it be reversed is the question. The pedal, the pedestrian and the public transport is what the solution is. The 3P solution as we call it. Healthy cities consist of safety, shade and society. Let us look at safety. And just look at the slides and it can tell you directly how safe we are on our arteries of the cities. Is this safe? And finally, it is safety which will matter. People are walking anywhere, not because they love to walk like that, because there is no space for them to walk. People cross like this. When it is uncomfortable, people will do this. Though there may be a foot over bridge, people will still prefer to cross at grade because we don't want to climb up 4.5 meters. You have subways like this, which are dark and dingy, which will remain unsafe for women, elderly people. You may have foot over bridges and then you cover it up like this. It will become again a dangerous space for anybody to cross over. Inconvenience is always there. Climbing up this is extremely uncomfortable. Building foot over bridges is actually making car putting into more convenience and putting people into inconvenience. At grade crossings are the best world over. So you can do that. You will see hardly anybody on these, but we keep on spending on this kind of infrastructure. This is a subway in Pune where 1.5 meter you go down and 1.5 meter the vehicle goes up. And it has been in place for last 30 years and it is open to sky, not dark. It is socially safe and it is very, very active. These kind of solutions, which are design solutions, finally, which architects, urban designers, landscape architects all have to come out with, need to be looked at. Safety for walking, though you have a footpath because it is up and down, the lady is on the street itself. The people are on the street directly. The cyclist is on a space where though the cycle track is there on the left hand side, because the material chosen is not appropriate, he is on the road, risking his life. Eyes on the streets. We always talk about hawkers at times as nuisance on the street, but they are the eyes on the street. And that is how safety on the street comes in. The hawkers facing the shop, being inside the footpath, also adds to the safety factor. And you don't also give an opportunity for cars to stop and shop. You walk and shop. Safety today is conceived by these cameras. United States, UK, China. Indian cameras are the eyes. And finally, eyes on the street, as Jane Jacobs said, is what matters for safety of a city. Shade. You have streets on top, that is the temperature. No rocket science, simple logic. With trees, that is the temperature. So what would you prefer? But still we treat trees like this, where we put tar around it and we are not trying to take care of our trees on the street. Mere design solutions of maybe shifting the curb on the left hand side with little bit of soil there would prevent these trees from falling off during a thunderstorm or rain. Same in this. This is in Coimbatore. So can these kind of lovely trees on the street be preserved like this and streets would have the walkable pathway under the shade. The trees also add to the social life on the street and give you a lot of opportunities. This is one of them. Shade on the street can be created by this wonderful umbrella canopy on top in Portugal. This is in Jaipur. And this is the most innovative one in the city of Pune. At the red light, when you stop, this is a canopy which is created by people. Imagine if trees gave free Wi-Fi, we would all be planting like crazy. It is a pity they only give us oxygen we breathe. Society in a city is extremely important, and beyond the boundary, the society must have space to interact. This is a street in Gangtok, which is pedestrianized. This is Istiqlal Avenue in Istanbul, with a tram in between and a people's place, and pedestrian streets and pedestrian spaces world over. This is the famous Manhattan Square, Times Square. On left-hand side, what it was, and right-hand side, what it is. And that is what a public space in one of the world's densest Manhattan fabric creates. Seoul flyover, demolished and given to public as a public space. So this is the society that we can create. And this mayor at Seoul won the election 3 times after he created these kind of realms in Seoul. Ask a kid what kind of a city does he want. This is the kind of a painting the kid comes out with. Principles of neighborhood planning have been fundamental right from Dockside days. 10 minutes walk, short walk, public art, my neighborhood, neighborhoods which are self-sufficient. We have been all learning about that. But what I'm trying to show you is that not only we, the builders' brochures also try to put in this. So these are some images from the builders' brochures from all over India. It talks about, you can read the red points there, short walkway, walking distance. Imagine your children hopping, skipping, jumping to school, right of way for pedestrians. So all the points that we are discussing, children play with no cars coming their way. This is what is their brochure saying. So if that is so, that means we are on the same page. And if we are on the same page, these are the site plans of all these townships, which are being built in last decade or so. And if the townships are supposed to have these facilities, my question is very simple. Why not a ward or a neighborhood, which is walkable, cyclable, has a museum, has a garden, has a library, has a gym, which is, so if every neighborhood becomes sustainable and self-sufficient, I think we'll have better quality of life. And this is a comparative that we did between the builders' townships and a ward. And we are trying to take this project to the corporator, the politician. And the project was called Project Dasha to Project Disha. Disha in Hindi is called direction. What direction we will take? Because we have to be positive and give solutions. There is no point in cribbing and only criticizing. Disha project is demonstration of integrated, safe, habitable, affordable solutions for neighborhood. How to change the Dasha, the present condition of your neighborhood is simple 4 steps: data collection, design, discuss. I think Dr. Ahmed was also talking about people participation, and that is very, very important. And in the end, demonstrate. If we do that, if we put in street lighting, garbage, trees, walking, cycling, public transport, handicap, vendors, kattas and open spaces, public spaces, our property values will go up, safety will go up, health will go up, social interaction will go up, pollution will go down, and fuel consumption will go down. And having said that, we will be able to bring in qualitative, economic, and environmental changes leading to creation of healthy, hygienic, habitable neighborhoods. 11 number bus is extremely important to connect communities. 11 number bus is the walking and the cycling. A street has all these components. What priorities you set is very important. The green one is the priority that one should be giving to make a healthy neighborhood. And the red one is the priority, which is as of today. An equitable distribution of a road space is extremely critical, that everybody has a space on the street, right from pedestrian, hawkers, cyclists, parking, cars, buses, trees, and services. This is a simple change which was brought in by Michael Bloomberg in New York, whereby merely painting one created a equity within the street by giving few 3 lanes for the cars, space for people to sit in the center of the street itself as a public realm, and cyclists. So it doesn't really require a lot of infrastructure cost, and it is simple tactical urbanism. Coming back to this slide, which enforces that yes, we can do it with these principles. Our journey of demonstration started in Aout almost 10 to 12 years ago in 3 stages. The first stage was with a hoarding like this coming up where the politician declared that he want to beautify the street at a cost of 1 crore. And we gave him a proposal along with the local NGOs saying that the street could be designed like this in the public interest. And we also said that if you design it like this, I'm sure you will win the elections. And next day we started with the chalk and the marking directly on the street with no working drawings, nothing, one tactical urbanism on the street. People's discussions, number of discussions, and we joined the points of the minimum width that was available, and 12 meter to 12 meter were joined together, and whatever rest was created as a public realm. The section was that we had on one side almost 14 meters of public realm, which saving all the trees. So this was before, and what you see at the lower is after it was executed. Simple sitting with whatever was available in the tender document, bricks and plaster, we created this kind of a sitting arrangement and saved all the trees there. And people responded, and this has been in place for last almost a decade now. Though this was only 500 meters, I think a bottom-up approach is the only way to do it. The footpath at the same level so that we can walk. And the people's responses are the most important in this, that what do the people say? And if people are with you, then you can keep on executing this part by part. The stage 2 was taking it ahead into the neighborhood and taking up these 3 sectors together with the help of students from PVP College of Architecture and many NGOs like Parisar and Samnet. We started a journey of expanding this. Workshop was held, discussions were held with citizens, and a public exhibition happened on the same street. And with this discussion came out a resolution along with the politician that we will expand this into the neighborhood and make a better network for a healthy environment for the people, by the people. The neighborhood journey stage 3 started after 6 years, though that 3-sector demonstration did not happen. Now came the opportunity of the smart city mission, and somehow the same area was chosen to be as a demonstrative area for the area-based development. People, policy, participation, platform, and patience are the key to any live demonstration that if one wants to do. The key plan of that own Baner Balewadi area and the zone of Baner, where we were asked to do one street as a pilot. The red one that you see, which is horizontal parallel to your screen, S1, was the one which was chosen. We convinced the commissioner and the team that we can start off with the one street, but let us make a complete network of 9 streets. So you can see these 9 streets which were marked S1 to S9, though we started execution of the first street and the design. The strategy again was design, discuss, and demonstrate. The points which were to be incorporated, which we got vetted from the system or the commissioner and the corporation and the people were, priorities were walkability with equity and dignity, universal accessibility, safe and cycle-friendly environment, hawkers and vendors policy, neighborhood level transport, organized parking with a policy for parking, creating people-friendly realm, and incorporating technology. With these points, we started the process. And obviously the others followed, like water supply, MSCB, drainage, the systems, which normally are taken care of. But the first part that is mentioned over here is never been a priority in Indian cities. Street furniture, signage, public art, recreation space were also set as priorities. Facade material texture as an urban design exercise was also listed down, but we were not able to achieve much as far as the execution was concerned in this realm. The design proposal of the street, the red street as S1, was there were two alternatives made. The first alternative was where you had parking. This is the existing scenario. The parking on both sides, the street in the center, and the footpath on both sides. So this was the first alternative, where we had a street, we had parking, we had cycle track, which were not segregated but painted, and the pedestrian footpath. So this was the alternative one. In the second, the alternative, one of the street on the left was completely converted into a pedestrian plaza. The right was made one way, and there was a loop which was available at the back side, was used for re-regulating the traffic. And this was supposed to be a permanent solution so that we have a public realm along with. This street has a lot of shops, so a lot of activity there. The alternative, the other side of the street had a similar solution with parking on both sides and pedestrian and MB lanes. A lot of public discussions happened. Both designs were put in discussion with the people, a lot of deliberation, lot of if and buts. The local corporator, the local member of parliament, the engineers, citizens, all participated. And we made a model of this street. And this street model was also presented at the first anniversary of the Smart City Mission, which was launched and inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister. And then the project was to start. But before starting, one thought that we must test this left-hand side, which is the pedestrianization and closing the street. So a 1 week trial run was done. And before the trial run, there were public discussions held with all shopkeepers, citizens, and meeting. It was titled as Healthy Aund. Aund is the local name. And in Marathi, in the local language, Ata aple angan. Ab aapka angan, and now your courtyard. The Aund as a neighborhood is your courtyard. This is what we are trying to put across. And healthy for us, that time we took it to the people as habits, ecology, amenities, lifestyle, technology, heritage, and above all was you. The people are important, and that's why the Y is in red. A lot of posters were done with the help of CE, Center for Environment Education, Parisar, ITDP. So as Dr. Ahmed again said, it is collaborative. It is not an individual work at all. I may be presenting this, but you can see the logos on the top. It's Pune Municipal Corporation, it is Smart City Limited, and people. So this was the invitation, and there's a number of posters made like this: U-turn for mobility, cycle friendly cities, 11 number bus, DP Road walking plaza. How do you improvise and take care of a complete neighborhood beyond one particular street? We also introduced what was called as UDAN. The UDAN name now sounds very good, but we deliberated and some 30 names were identified, and finally UDAN was put in. What is UDAN? UDAN is a local transport like this. So you have the green service, you have the blue service, orange service, red service, and the yellow service, which is available at a frequency within the neighborhood. So my father, my mother, or maybe anybody else can go within 1 to 2 to 3 kilometers using this. And how does it look like? It looks like this. So it is like a hop and off on. So it is quick and it is on the loop on your mobile. So green loop, red loop, orange and blue loop. These were the kind of signage things or nameplates or boards we made, and we put it across and we suggested, we worked out the timings also. So everything was part of this whole exercise, and that is how it would look if implemented. So when the trial run started from 8th October to 15th October, this is how this was converted into, and that was what happened on that particular street, which was 24 hours, 7 days. One doesn't have to say anything, one has to only see the visuals, that how did it change the lives from the toddlers to the senior citizens. There were mixed reactions, there were a lot of positives, there's some negatives too. The wheelchair came back, the senior citizens, the cycles, and the UDAN in a different form, because we could not get the permission to get that kind of UDAN. The people in the end were very happy, and particularly senior citizens like this said, you may do anything, but please don't stop UDAN. But till today, the UDAN has not happened as such because it requires certain RTO permissions and some different kind of a working. But we are hopeful that this will happen. But many other things have happened. When it closed, one always looked at it that The future lies with these youngsters who are always looking for innovations. The process of implementation started after this, and the criterias were the wheelchair. At that time, the Sugamma Bharat Abhiyan was on, where one said that universal accessibility has to become part of every design. That would help to pull this luggage trolley, get the pram back, get the shopping cart also. The idea was that if the neighborhood has this shopping cart, can be moved on one level of the footpath, then we don't have to take out cars for shorter distances. And I can put heavy stuff into the cart and move around. And that was the dream. Public discussion for the third time before implementation to take people into confidence. And this was the street. Though the alternative one only was implemented, one could convince the shopkeepers. You can see the yellow, which is going right till the shop inside. One could ask them to surrender all the frontages. So the footpath became almost 6 to 8 to 10 meters wide at locations. So this section which existed, the yellow, please observe, the yellow expanded right till the boundary or right till the shop, giving easy accessibility. And then he worked out all the services, and the final drawing was endorsed by the Honorable Commissioner and the full system, and signed and okayed that this is what to be implemented. And this proposal was adopted. 18 elements were incorporated, and I will run through them quickly. I have 13 minutes still to go. Raised pedestrian crossing. And this is now pure design. Here comes the role of the architects, urban designers, and we as qualified professionals. This is the way our raised pedestrian crossings are. And what does it do? Speed breakers kill, causes 30 crashes and 9 deaths in a day. How do you redesign this? We said that why can't we have stone rumble strip before the raised crossing? And can it be like this? This is done all over Europe in our old cities, so that to reduce the speed before you go to the raised crossing. It took us an effort to convince the system to get it executed, but we are able to get it executed in place. A lot of objections, a lot of deliberations, but this is in place for last 3 years and working reasonably well. Median and divider. You have medians which are made out of concrete like this, or the steel railings, which at times are dangerous. In case you hit these dividers, then it can be fatal. At the same time, the speeds on the street gets reduced if you are, because you cannot drive very close to the concrete dividers. We wanted dividers like this. The hedges that are there, how do you make them? The question raised was that it will take time for this to grow, and then people will cross in between. And I think the questions raised were very, very right. So to get this will take time. That is what was proposed. And this is what we did a little research. So why can't we have a mesh in between and have the divider happening? We could get everybody on board, including the execution team, and we put that in. This is the way the divider looks like. The early days, it has taken this shape. After a while, it looks like this. And in the lockdown, it is looking like that. I know it needs trimming because it's almost coming onto the street, but this is how the realm can completely change. It is always say small things and then things can be adopted throughout the city. So these were the experiments that we did, and we hope that, and this may not be the only solution, there could be many other solutions too, but experimentation is very, very important. Bollards, no rocket science, but they are like that. They are made out of stainless steel at times, which go into pilferage, and people may be taking it away and selling it. So how do you do these? The distances between bollards are not appropriate. You come out with concrete bollards with reflectors that was in place, put with a distance so that motorcycles don't cross, but the wheelchair can move through. Tree gratings is again no rocket science, but we don't have proper tree gratings in place. Our trees finally have this kind of finishes at the ground level. Steel gratings out of steel or any other material are again not appropriate. So cast them in concrete and get the gratings in place and then give dignity to the trees is extremely important. Tree sittings at times are like this, varying heights, such a short distance between the tree and the edge, no earth there, no breathing space. Should we have and allow better breathing spaces? With a lot of detail and deliberations, we almost put it to 2 meter by 2 meter and got in stone to have the sitting around it. It was again difficult to get the stone in, but the local material, local craft, we were able to convince and get the stone sittings around the trees. And that is how it looks once executed. There's some 70 or 150 trees on these streets and 35 varieties. We saved each and every tree on this street. And that is what public realm started becoming. Feeder pillars. All of us know that these feeder pillars are essentials, but they look like this. So how do you take care of them? We relocated these feeder pillars and also created a case around it along with these kind of sheets. And that is what the process was followed. And then Pune Binale Foundation helped us create this kind of a artwork around this. And that's how it looks. Parallel parking. Pune luckily has adopted parallel parking. And we wanted this parallel to be parking to be numbered. You can see on the left hand side on top, this is the kind of a numbering we have in the basements of the malls. That so many car parkings are there, so many are available. So if we could have put a sensor below this, each and every car park space, and we have it on a mobile, we know that within the neighborhood, what kind of a space is available where, so that I can move to that particular street for parking. And parking also needs to be charged. It is a public space, and public space, you cannot have parking which is free. Like in malls also, we pay for the parking. For streets, you should be paying quite a lot of charges, and the charges need to be what is called telescopic. So the first hour could be 10 rupees, second hour 20 rupees, third hour 30 rupees. Our research showed, and the shopkeepers were quite concerned about availability of parking to their customers. But what we found was people in the morning come, park here because it is free, take a chartered bus and go to their companies, and they come back in the evening. So virtually the car is parked throughout the day, free, and the shoppers who come during the daytime don't find any parking space. So I think paying for parking has become very, very important, and the policy is under process, and I hope that it will come through. Cycle lane. Different kind of cycle lanes can be done. Hot paint, cold paint, powder coating, all was tested. Cycle lane could not be taken inside because a lot of trees there, but the width of the street being not very wide and not heavy traffic, dedicated cycle lane was not possible. So the cycle lane also let the whole neighborhood revive the cycle tradition. Entry and exit, which is not at the same level, virtually forces pedestrians to walk on the street. So this pedestrian footpath, as was explored in the very first example in Aund 10 years ago, was put on the one level using the Universal Accessibility Act as a tool of law. And that is how it comes through. At the entrances, you see these small entrance niches, which has the green area, and also it takes care of the dustbins or the poles. So you don't really drill or dig into the pavement anywhere and everywhere, and you have soft areas available at the entrance to take care of signages and dustbins and any other such requirements. The same signages come into these entry points, soft areas. Universal accessibility, tactile. So the wheelchair is back. This is what we have seen in last 3 years. The gap between is exactly the same for any handicapped person or the wheelchair to move. This has also led rolling of the bags back. So if I want to go for 1 kilometer, I don't have to take out a car or ask my father to drop me or son to drop me to some particular bus stop. I can just roll the bag. This will reduce the number of trips on the street and also the parking mess that we have. This is over the year, the documentation that my office keeps on doing. One might be wondering about this pram, and such a wonderful thing to be having, that you're shopping inside a mall free of car space. So this is a similar space over here. The footpath being wide, it is a pedestrian realm, the prams are back. And you can look at the happy couple there. And finally, that is what society is all about. Lighting on the street. The question was raised by the local politician. You are widening the street, and if you widen the street footpath so much, and if you don't have good lighting, it could be dangerous at times. Yes, he was absolutely right. But we provided for lighting, and that is how the whole street looks like. Art and sculpture was put in by Pune Binale Foundation. And these are the sculptures made out of junk, which were done during the Binale, and they were brought back and installed over here. Games on the street, the snakes and ladder. Know your trees. As I said in the earlier, that there were some 35 species on this street. So we thought that if we could get this kind of a knowledge base to the children, and anyone who is on the street, one can go and read what the tree is all about. It is in Marathi and English. So this could become a botany class for the school children. If a family is coming, the children can read this, or the parents can read it out, whereas the wife may be in the shop or the husband may be in the shop. Somebody can help us, and this could become an interesting live botany class possible. Urban lounge is the toilet. The toilets on the street accommodated in a designer way, which can be sponsored by some companies. But yes, this has not happened as of yet. We hope that this will come through, but it needs to have a very, very strong sense of management. Bus stops, which normally block the streets, need to be very sleek so that you can virtually walk through the bus stops. And that is what one designed and planned for. There are many gates like this. So we are told that let us dismantle these gates and put uniform gates all around. We said that is not sustainable at all. And the gates don't look bad. Let us have some uniform design policy for that. So we marked all these gates, put them together, created a system and a mark. And we said we'll just paint it black and put the stickers around so that we have uniformity. We talk about sustainability. So virtually we have to put in that whatever we can retrofit, we must do that. And that is how it looks. The street ambience, I will just run through these. So now we are expanding this to another 5 kilometers within this neighborhood. And we hope that the beyond the boundary that we are talking about will become extremely active. And once this whole neighborhood becomes universal accessible, people will walk, people will take out their prams, and this will be replicated all over. This is before and after, which could be extremely critical for everyone and tells the story complete. You can see the front margins of the Bank of Maharashtra, which has been now merged with the footpath. And that took us some effort to convince these shopkeepers that please release your front margins and we will give you a direct access. And that is how we have been able to create the pedestrian realm. We have not reduced the width of the carriageway. There is a lot of discussion which goes because proportionately the footpath looks wider, people feel that we have reduced the carriageway. Carriageway has remained the same. It is only that the shopkeepers have surrendered their frontages, and that is how that has become a public realm. Look at the footpath which was up and down, the trees which never had this soft areas around, and that is the change. This is the central image. That's how the street looks like. And somewhere we could really reclaim another 4-5 meters on the left hand side. This spot before and this spot has become after. We could get 4 meters as per the development plan line and acquire the property. This space also has completely become a large space. You can see what was in the private realm and what has now come into the public realm. This is a walk by the Honorable Secretary, Smart City Mission, the Commissioner, Pune Municipal Corporation, Deputy Commissioner, and all the dignitaries when this was done. And it has been very satisfying, but it has been 20 years since we have been into it, and finally it took a long time to get it executed. This is Honorable Kunal Kumar, the Commissioner of Pune Municipal Corporation. He states, streets are important public spaces that should be designed to respond to various functions that they host, beyond being mere conduits of vehicles. This is Paul Barter. He is a world-renowned parking management expert. Let us seize the chance for parking success without excess, because parking will never be adequate. You provide for more and more parking, cars will keep on coming, but we must charge the parking. This is one of the best statements made by IAS officer, and this is credits to ITDP, Shreya Gadapalli, who has shared it on her Facebook. I used to think that those who ask for footpaths and buses and control parking were foolish. Today, I have realized that I was foolish, not them. I now know what I must go back and do. This is the feedback from an IAS officer following a presentation on sustainable transportation by Shreya Gadepalli, South Asia Director, ITDP, at IAS Training Academy in Missouri. So this is the change. So for this kind of one has to get everyone on board: the bureaucrats, the politicians, the engineers, the merchant associations, the citizens, the NGOs, the hawkers, the sweepers, everyone. And it is very complex. The police, it's extremely important to get the traffic. Democracy is decided by the width of the footpath in the city, because this has to be democratic. Our constitution gives the right that everybody has a right and has a equity. Dr. Ahmed was talking about equity, and this is what equity is beyond. These were some feedbacks. A lot of feedbacks were taken by the smart city, and the entire team, my office team, the engineering team of Pune Municipal Corporation Road Department, NGOs, the citizens, all contributed in making this a success, which is still on. It's a slow journey. I had mentioned in the beginning, it needs a lot of patience and perseverance, and that is what is important. But it is very good and heartening to see many people and many cities now venturing into this. And apart from citizens, obviously, you always look for people coming and saying that you are doing it well. So this is also what we had termed this as found the mall under the tree canopy. That is what we call it, because the shopkeepers were extremely worried that they will lose their business. And we were trying to tell them that what is the difference between a mall and this? Mall is a complete pedestrian space, and this is the pedestrian space we are giving you. Mall has a charged parking, so we should charge the parking. Mall has an air-conditioned environment, and here it's air-conditioned by the natural way. So currently, the malls are not open, but this street or this urban mall, the tree canopy is open for people. So I hope this will bring in change. And as I said, that finally you need also some kind of a pat on the back. And we are extremely happy to have Mr. Doshi on this street and looking at it and appreciating the work that was done. Currently, we are involved in the cities. We work in urban design, mobility, a lot of work on affordable housing, and all with public participatory processes. This is in terms of urban design, placemaking, open spaces, neighborhood upgradation. And in affordable housing, we have been doing housing for the poor. That is what I think a question was asked by someone. And for the poor, if we want to create housing, then the policy at the government level has to be in place. Housing for poor cannot be created by the private sector. Housing for the poor has to become a government policy. Then only the poor will be accommodated. This was a BSUP slum upgradation program on the left-hand side that you see how slums can get a facelift, which we did almost 5 years ago, where around 1,200 houses were built and upgraded in an existing slum without demolishing a single house. And currently we are part of the Pune Cycle Plan, the shuttle service, bus rapid transit system, which Dr. Ahmed also talked about. And there was a question between bus rapid transit system and the metro. I think the rapid transit system of buses or bus system cost much, much lesser than the metro, and it can reach your doorstep. We are also part of the Pune Metro last mile connectivity. These are what we have been awarded with. That is our office team. And what I need to say at the end is healthy, hygienic, humane neighborhoods can only happen when we start designing beyond the boundary with people participatory approach. The boundaries need to be broken. Boundaries within the today, we have all gated communities. Gated communities existed for a long time. It is not. But today's the criteria of a gated community has completely changed. So I think we need to look slightly beyond this, open up the boundaries within professions, within multidisciplinary approaches, open up the boundaries with discussion with people, politicians, bureaucrats, and the citizens, and the journey continues. Thank you very much. Thank you for patient hearing. And these are our contacts. If anybody wants to get in touch with us, they can come on our Instagram page, which is very active. Facebook is also active to a certain extent. And there is a blog, and we have our email ID and the contact. You can take a screenshot and connect with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for a gripping, full of live examples and an informative presentation. You laid emphasis on how healthy and hygienic neighborhoods can be created by linking the same with the human body, by making people participate in the design process, and by laying focus on principles of neighborhood planning through Project Disha. You also shed light on interesting research and sayings by eminent personalities while explaining examples of different cities. Thank you so much, sir. We already have a few questions. I'll read them out to you. All right. How to control a particular lane to be used for its specific purpose? For example, how to stop two-wheelers from entering the cycle lane? How have you tackled this problem?
So let us understand the cycle first. Now, Indian cities used to have cycles, and the first and the foremost important thing for a cyclist is safety. I sent my elder son to the school on a bicycle, and I never sent my younger son to the school on a bicycle. The reason was very simple, because the road next door was widened. As soon as the street was widened, the speed increased, and as soon as the speed increases, speed kills. So nobody is going to take this risk of sending anyone or letting the cycle go. So how do you do safe bicycling? There are 3 layers, and this is what we have proposed in the Pune Bicycle Plan also. When the street is wide, where buses are going, trucks are going, you absolutely need dedicated cycle tracks. Now, dedicated cycle tracks with a buffer between this high speed and on the left-hand side. The streets that I showed you in between, which are artery streets into the neighborhood, here we cannot create dedicated cycle tracks. So the cycle track has to be part of the MV lane, where you have a painted cycle lane. And the last and the third type is the neighborhood artery, which comes right at your doorstep, where the lane widths are narrower. So automatically the speed is less. We must remember, narrower the street, lesser the speed. Wider the street, more the speed. So the safety automatically comes because of the width of the street. Having said that, the in-between one, which is the painted street, which you saw the example, obviously the street is available for the car as well as the two-wheeler as well as the cyclist. But the painted cycle lane is demarcated for the cyclist, so he has a priority on it. And in the end, anything needs to be implemented, and it has to be people's behavior. As soon as the number of cyclists will go up, people will stop using this cycle lane, the motorist or the two-wheeler ones. it is like a zebra crossing. People did say that painted cycle lane doesn't work. Years ago, zebra crossing came. What is a zebra crossing? Zebra crossing is a painted marking on the street giving the right of way for a pedestrian. Now it needs to be implemented. It needs to be implemented so that the vehicles stop there. So anything and everything cannot be controlled by design. There has to be a behavioral change. There has to be a campaign. There were a lot of slides which I have not shown. But Manoj Patil, who was the DCP of Pune police years ago, virtually got this implemented through law, because there is a law also. So mixed traffic conditions, the right of way is for the cyclist. The two-wheeler can use it when the cyclist is not there. But you cannot have separate lanes for two-wheelers as such, because two-wheeler and car both are motorized and they are at a speed of 20, 30, 40 kmph per hour in a city. In a city, nothing should move beyond 40 kilometers, and that is kmph, and that is what the speed is. Otherwise, you need to have dedicated cycle lanes, which can only happen in a wider street. There have been also experiments which are done where cyclists, between the cycle lane and the MB lane, there is marking, or there are reflectors which are there, or there are bollards also which are put. So there are all experiments, but people's behavior has to change, and people have to understand that cyclists also has a right of way. That's what we talked about, equitable distribution of road space. Yeah.
All right, thank you for answering that one, sir. Another question is, what is the impact of open public spaces on built environment at neighborhood level, and how will their role change post-COVID?
I don't really see that post-COVID, the roles really change. I think open spaces are lungs. They are the green spaces, the spaces where what you need for play, you need for oxygen, we need for social interaction. And these open spaces will remain. People will come back. And one is very hopeful that this situation will change over a period of time. What I think the COVID situation has really brought us to realization is that the pendulum I showed, we are at the extreme end of the pendulum. We need to choose a middle path, and we have to come back to environment and health is extremely important. The Michael Bloomberg statement is extremely critical. It comes that you need clean air and oxygen to breathe. And that clean air and oxygen can only come if we have open spaces, if we have green spaces, and if we have less pollution. And that value addition has happened. And open spaces are the lungs of the city, and the lungs of the city, not only at neighborhood level, the cantonments, the universities, these are the lungs of the city. And if we start disturbing these lungs, then the value goes down. I would also give another example. Look at the way if any commercial project, also a housing project, is also selling. They are also all the time talking about everybody wants a bungalow or a flat or anything opening or looking onto a green. Nobody wants a flat or an apartment looking onto some other dense area. So I think the importance of green has a lot to do with commercials also, and that needs to be balanced. The concrete jungles that we are creating, and a beautiful slide was shown by Dr. Ahmed. So densification we are doing, where is the green? And then we want to go on a weekend to a resort or somewhere. That weekend we will go and look at green and come back and say, I have completed the quota of the green. No, it doesn't happen that way. I think the green and the natural environment has to become part of your life. Thank you.
Another question, sir. What can urban designers do to prevent contagion of virus-based diseases in cities? What type of role they will play in designing such public spaces?
So urban designers don't have that way direct role in virus, but if we talk about health, and that is what one is talking about, the garbage lying on the street, can we design for it? Can we work for it? Can we really create an environment? See, urban design as a single entity does not really can change the whole situation. It has to be a teamwork, and urban designers can play a lot of role in working with people. See, it is extremely important that we take out our hats and become citizens and work with citizens to get this thing done. Any kind of a virus or something, is coming from any. Today it is COVID, tomorrow it could be something else. So I don't think we have a control on it, but trying to create an environment which is better for people to have longevity of life is what is important, and for which I think we have to work together. We have to work with the government services. I think we have to enter into the system. We cannot be outside the system and do it. All this, what you have seen, may look, it has happened now. No, it is 20 years that we have been walking with NGOs, governments, and trying to tell them that this has to happen. Maybe the opportunity now has come and it is happening, but this is very, very minuscule. It is very, very minuscule. It is one neighborhood in the city of Pune, and there are many parallels are now happening. And I must tell you that urban designers are getting into government, getting into systems, and more architects and urban designers get and sensitize people. I think it is very important for us to sensitize the system and keep on educating them. I think the role of education and educating people, saying that these are the benefits, need to be taken up. And the schools of architecture also play a very important role in that. So everyone is doing that, and many organizations and architects, urban designers are currently landscape architects, but not to that much of an extent. I think the number has to increase. And I must say the younger brigade, the youngsters are extremely concerned about this, and they will, and they are part of this movement. Our office has, most of the people who are working are all youngsters.
Thank you, sir. One more question, sir. A concern of what if the density of the neighborhood exceeds? How far are the employment opportunities?
Can you come again? This is about density and employment opportunity.
Yes. What if the density of the neighborhood exceeds? How far are the employment opportunities?
See, the employment opportunities is again beyond our control. It is a government policy, but certainly one should say that there are these three layers at which the employment opportunities come. One is the village level, one is the town level, and then one is the mega city level. And if you want to understand the learnings, I think there is a big learning from this last 4 months that there needs to be a change at every level. The village level opportunity, if it comes through in terms of an employment, in terms of health, and in terms of education, these three things at the village level, so automatically the migration will have a different meaning altogether. Only those will migrate who want to have a different kind of a lifestyle, or they are specialized in something, and they could be in the village itself. The smaller towns or the medium towns are the biggest opportunity for creating that kind of job opportunities. And the cities do offer, as Mr. Korea said, the cities are the engines of the growth, but somewhere this needs to change. And job is extremely important, but within neighborhood areas, within this thing, earlier we used to have work and live relationship, you know. This was Niche Dukan Upar Makan. And that was the kind of a mixed land use opportunity that we had. Today we have created this where we travel from one point to another point, and that is added to the stresses of the city. The traveling is the biggest stress. Imagine people spending 1 and 2 hours one way, 4 hours in a day traveling. And this would change because of technology. And I think 4 months again has told us that it is possible to have this conference online. It is possible to conduct n number of things online. So I think that will change the whole density pattern. It will also change the job opportunity pattern. It will change the job opportunity pattern. But I must also say that this will not change the complete physical meeting style. There cannot be any debate whether education finally has to happen in the classroom, majority, and maybe partially it can be online. So I think, as the pendulum said, there has to be always a middle path and a balance. We cannot be in the extreme. So job opportunities is coming through. People can create job opportunities sitting at home itself. People are doing bakery from home, the neighborhood, selling things, sending things online. I think these kind of mixed land use propositions are extremely important. Maybe there is gardening, maybe there is all this big talk now that is going on about creating your own vegetables within the spaces of the neighborhood. can also be explored. I think these are the new avenues which have to be looked at. Vertical farming is being talked about. So I think there is a huge opportunity there.
Thank you.
I'm not an economist to comment on it any further. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay, this question says, in a tropical country like India, does really cycle tracks work efficiently? Can it be implemented in its true sense when there is a hurdle in any form at every doorstep in B-type cities?
Okay. Now that is a common question all around. First, let me also try to tell you that the research has proven that total number of trips that are there in the city, 50% of the trips or more than 50% of the trips are less than 2 to 3 kilometers. Less than 2 to 3 to 4 kilometers. So we must understand this. Now, if 50% of the trips are less than 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers, that means it is going to the market, going to the school, going to within the neighborhood area. So can't these be taken up by walking and cycling? And I think cycling for 15-20 minutes is not going to be much of a problem, provided it is safe. I think the temperature, that's why you must have shade along the tree. So that will take care of. And safety along the street. So if these number of trips are reduced, then cycling will happen within the neighborhood. One is not talking about 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers or 20 kilometers of cycling, which could be quite strenuous and which could be exhaustive also. But let me tell you, there is a data which also says that there is 5 to 7%, which is called the captive bicyclist. And more research is done by Dr. Geetam Tiwari at IIT Delhi. And she says that this captive cyclist is there on the street because he cannot afford any other mode of any mode of transport. It is not fun cycling. Today, cycling has also become weekend pe chalo, let us play go and do cycle, you know. So weekend I am doing cycling. No, cycling has to become a mode of transport. So 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers is fine. Those who are going for a job, they may travel for 10 kilometers because he cannot afford any other mode of transport. The other thing is cycling in Copenhagen, Denmark, Netherlands, all these countries has not happened and come through overnight. It took them 20 years of effort to get cycle back. And these are cold countries where they cycle in snow condition also and chilling winds. So I think weather is not such a criteria if you are doing it within 3 to 4 to 5 kilometers. And it is faster too because you can negotiate. It can take shorter routes and it is a part of an exercise. Imagine going to a gym. We go to a gym in a Mercedes Benz or a car, park it there, then go to a gym and then do a cycle and a treadmill as a warm up. Why can't I go to a gym on a bicycle so I've saved those 15 minutes of warm up or 10 minutes of warm up and then do the other exercises? So cycle has to also become part of the lifestyle, and cycle is not for Sunday to Sunday cycling that we are talking about. Cycle as a mode of transport to bring down pollution, bring down the number of trips, and also reduce on the parking space. And let me assure you, in Indian conditions also, it is very much possible. We are not in auditorium. I wish I was in Ambala in auditorium. I would have asked the audience of these 377 right now that I see, how many of you went to the school walking and cycling? I'm sure 50% or more than that said that they went walking and cycling to the school. And if I ask them today, how many of you will send your children on bicycle to the school? Everybody will say no, because it is not safe. It is because of safe. It's not because of shade that people don't use cycle. And I think we have to change our lifestyle. We have to change this whole habits, you know. It is like that slide of food that I showed, no? Pizza, burger versus Indian thali. I'm not saying don't have pizza and burger. You can certainly have it, but seldom, maybe once a week. But everyday staple food should be the Indian thali, which is the most nutritious. So I think the balances are very, very important. And it is possible. Let me assure you it is possible.
Right, sir. Very well said. We have another question, sir. How to ensure the long-term engagement of people on the streets? Because as of now, that's the biggest issue we face in India. Not able to hold people's attention for long term. So how to ensure that?
People's engagement in the sense that people coming and spending time on the street, I didn't really understand. Or people engaging in these kind of projects? What is it about? I can answer both of them. If you want to engage people in the
projects,
you have to be perseverance, patience, and you have to get them. It's like a class, no? In a class, there are 40 students, 60 students. Some are very, very good. They are very receptive. Some are not that much. And some you need more attention. So with the people also, it's the same thing. You have to get the people on board. And if you talk simple language, I think the whole thing is simple language. And the benefits have to be told directly to them. This question of cycles, painted cycle lanes, all these are asked by citizens only. But finally, when we told them that this is the benefit, so they have to choose the benefit. And you have to spend time with them, educate them, create small examples. So this is a 3-stage journey, what you have seen. The first one was only 500 meters. And second is people will come on the street and use public spaces if they are easily accessible, if they are safe. The eyes on the street is very important. That slide that I showed. Cameras don't work. Today we are into this whole camera mode. Camera will give you only a recording after the act is done. I'm sorry, miss, you understand what I am saying, what an act is. In lonely places, it is absolutely unsafe. Look at, there is an article which I have not put where the newspaper says, police tells women not to travel after 8 p.m. in Gurgaon. 8 बजे के बाद आप बाहर मत निकलिए, ये unsafe है. Same is maybe in Hinjawadi in Pune. Same is on the outskirts of the cities. The old city is the safest city because there are people on the street. People will come on the street because finally human beings need and love to socialize. They can't be always on a screen. And you have to give them opportunities. You have to give them spaces. And why we are saying street is, the street is available to you and it is 20% of the open space.
All right. So there are so many questions in the chat box, which is why we have taken more of your time.
That's
Although
okay.
we cannot,
I'm available. You can go on. I have no.
we cannot take all of them, sir. Just one last question.
Please.
The present organic growth of cities has many problems like narrow streets occupied by vendors and buildings, as shown in your presentations. What can we learn from these for future designs?
See the narrow streets and vendors. Let me come on the vendors. Vendors are essentials. They are part of the society. When I want a vendor, when I want a mochi, I don't want the mochi in front of my house, but I want it in front of your house. So when I want to pick up a quick apple or quick fruit or something, I need this vendor. So vendors are part of the society because we need them. Second, vendors are part of our economy. Now vendors encroach is a general thought process, which is there. Yes, they cannot sit anywhere and everywhere. That's where design comes into play. There's a slide with us that how do you demarcate space for a vendor? Again, comparing to a mall. Look at you have the street tapris where you have these thelas and everything. So why can't we put color spaces on the floor saying that this is where this vendor will be located and kept? It is exactly like in a mall where you have cafes inside the mall where the tile color changes and within the tile color that particular cafe is. Now somebody will say, how do you implement it? In any case, the vendors which are there on the street, they are there and the ward office and everybody knows that the vendors are there and there is a system in place. For the benefit of all, I think 3 years ago or 4 years ago, there has been an act passed by the parliament about the rights of vendors. So there is a Vendors Act. What does the Vendors Act says? The act says that pathariwalas and vendors have a right to do their vending on the street, but it needs to be organized. So the act very clearly says that this implementation has to be done by the state and implementation finally has to be done by the corporation. The municipal corporation has to implement it and they have to implement it at the ward level. How do you implement it? It is to be implemented by creating a vendors list in every ward. And there are 3 types of vendor. The vendor which may have a hand cart, the vendor who may sit on the floor, or a vendor who may spread across certain things. And each and every vendor will be given a token and he is registered. And for that space, he has to pay a particular amount to the system, that is the municipal corporation at the ward level. And you organize them. So the street and the spaces need to create space for the what you call the vendors. So when you have a street, Indian streets are not very straight in an alignment. So somewhere there is property lines which are changing, aage piche hoti hai. So when you have a street as the same street, somewhere you get light widths which are larger, some you get niches. So these niches and widths is the exact place where the vendor sits. So when he sits over there, that is what you demarcate it for. So I think it is a design exercise, it's a policy exercise, and it's a culture exercise also. And that is how it is to be. In absolute narrow streets, you carve out, but the narrow streets have all the time cars right till the edge. The vehicle is right till the edge. And I think we have to start balancing this. And balancing does not mean not purchasing a car or a two-wheeler. Let me tell you, car is an aspiration. People will keep on purchasing. The change that has to be brought in is a very single 1 point change. The 1 point change that has to come in is make parking space chargeable. That one change will completely change your mindset of taking out your vehicle every now and then. If you know that I'm going to take out my vehicle and my parking in a day is going to cost you 100 rupees, if the first hour is 10 rupees, second hour is 20 rupees, third hour is 30 rupees, you will think twice about taking out your car. And then you may pull in, you may use a cycle, you may use a bus system, and you may use a metro. So these choices will be in place. Somebody mentioned about Delhi Metro. Delhi Metro has come in at a cost of 1 lakh crore, and it has literally changed the life of Delhi middle class and the poor people. But has the car situation or the vehicle congestion on the street reduced? No, not at all. It has not, and it will never change until and unless you put these kind of some other checks and balances. So same is the narrow streets of old cities and all. They are not meant for a number of cars to be taken. They are meant for pedestrians. So you have people parking on the periphery of these old neighborhoods, and let shuttle services come in like Udan, which reach the doorstep, and give tokens to the people who are residents there so that they can only get their cars inside and park next to their residences because they are staying there. So they have a right on that. But others should park on the periphery, maybe underground somewhere. And the best thing is to get the underground metro in. Look at the way Shahjahanabad has changed because of the underground metro which comes to Chandni Chowk. So I think these are the changes. So it is not a easy solution. Multi-level solution over a period of decades will bring in this vibrance. And the last but not the least is I think Indian streets are vibrant because of this kind of a milieu that we have. A question could be, do we want to be too organized in everything? Or I think this kind of a urban milieu gives the essence of the Indianness to it. I think there has to be again a balance. You need not be too streamlined at places. Some kind of impromptu things happening, and that has to happen in the Asian condition, I think. Lively streets mean that. Things happen. Yeah,
Nicely explained, sir. I request all the participants to please mail us your questions in the email ID provided in the chat box. Sir, I would like to thank you on behalf of all the participants for an insightful lecture, and I'm again thankful to you and to Dr. Zebun Nasreen Ahmed for enlightening us with your valuable asset of knowledge on cities and their challenges. Thank you everyone for your active participation and patient listening.